Are now tuned in to Mind, Body, and Soul with Annette, where your host, Annette Harris, analyze intriguing life questions and concerns, such as, do Christians suffer from mental illness? Have you wondered why they act abnormal? Or you may ask, what is really going on in their minds? Do you need Annette? Well, keep listening for a biblical understanding of the psychology of the mind.
Hey, great afternoon and welcome to another wonderful session of Mind, Body, and Soul with Annette. And I am your host, Annette Harris. Thank you so much for joining us on today. And thank you for watching and listening. You know, of course, I have to acknowledge the Lord. Lord, we thank you for this wonderful day, for how you've blessed us to see it. We thank you for the bright sunshine. It's a beautiful day outside, and we are grateful and glad for another time and give them what you have given us. We pray that you would get the glory. In Jesus' name we pray. And I always like to quote the first part of Hosea 4 and 6, and it states, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee. And again, we are grateful to be here on this afternoon. It is another Wednesday, another time for Mind, Body, and Soul, and we are always excited. You probably say, you say that every time you come on the air, but I am. It has been almost 5 years, and I am excited about this show. You know, I want to let you know that there are three different ways that you can listen to us and or watch us on today. We are on the station's website, of course, IntellectualRadio.com, IntellectualRadio.com. You can listen to us there. You can also go to my Facebook page, Annette, known as Annette. And then we're also on YouTube Live at the present time. So if one of the avenues go down, you can go hop on over to the other one because we don't want you to miss anything on today. I do ask that when you come into our Facebook Live feed, if you would be so kind as to like and share. Please like and share. We want to know that you are there and want to hear from you on today. So I thank you so much for joining us. Elder Kevin McGee, I see you watching. Beatrice. Dr. Graham is on too. And with that in mind, I do want to go ahead and acknowledge my guest on this afternoon. I have a guest here in the studio and wonderful good friend of mine. I call him my brother, and he is just a blessing to me. Many of you probably have heard the history of Mind, Body, and Soul, and he and Angie Mims are to blame for getting Annette started in the radio.
Sorry.
In the radio
I'd like to give a
business.
public apology to everybody in radio land, YouTube land, for the catastrophe that she and I have started.
but they are the reasons. They threw me in. I was co-hosting with Sir Walter on one of his shows, and then Angie Mims just brought me into her show. So I got the bug from them, and here I am almost 5 years later. So I am grateful. I do like to acknowledge both of them every once in a while. You know, don't want to forget where you came from. So, Sir Walter, how are you on this afternoon?
Doing good. It's a wonderful morning.
Oh, that's so nice. But it's afternoon now.
Oh, my bad.
Can you change the words?
I took my daughter to the airport this morning. I had to get up at 3 a.m. So to me,
it's still morning.
It's a beautiful morning. Absolutely.
Oh, how nice of you, Pops. Took baby girl to the airport.
That's my baby. She's going to visit her brother in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, really?
Shout out to Walter Jr.
Oh, that is so nice. Yes, shout out to both of them.
Yeah.
You know, that girl's my heart. Deborah Banks, I see you on. Demetra Pitts, thank you for watching. Diane Leachman, thanks for joining. Hey, Michelle, she says, hey, Annette and Sir.
Hey,
that's our girl there.
Shelly.
Yes, Shelly. Shelly's on. Beatrice, I'm sorry, did I mention you? And Chadana and Janice John. Thanks for watching on
all
today.
The people that you see that I don't see.
Right. These are our friends.
They are friends.
You know, a lot of them, of course, I met through you.
I apologize again to the public for which it stands. My bad.
You know what, Sir Walter is, he kind of makes jokes or whatever, but he is a catalyst for a lot of things. But I think he does a great thing a lot of times, and even in social media land. I was talking about you on my pre-show, and I said this is Sir Walter of the Sir Walter Jones Show.
Oh, well, all right.
He is famous and or infamous, whichever one you want to call it.
We don't pay royalties for saying that.
We don't pay
No, we
royalties.
do not.
Okay, all
So
right.
that was free.
That was a
Freebie.
freebie. Okay.
Yes.
Well, he does have his own radio show, doing great work, and then also he does his own live feeds. And I was also telling them earlier that I do appreciate even when you come on to talk about the various events, current events that's going on, and kind of giving us insight. A lot of times I'll inbox you in a minute. Hey, are you gonna do a live feed on this? Can you please explain this to me?
You do.
And I appreciate when you do come on to give us insight. I was also letting them know that you and I, we normally have psychological and or philosophical discussions. We're inboxing each other and talking and whatever. And there was a study that came out where there were actually two different studies, but there was a study that came out that I said, oh God, Sir Walter, can you come on to talk about this with me? On Mind, Body, and Soul, we talk about the psychological and we talk about the spiritual aspects.
Mhm.
And today, I guess we'll kind of be venturing into more of the psychological, if you will. And I see Dr. Joyce is on as well. I told her I wanted her to chime in as well. But there was a study that was talking about adverse childhood events. And it talked about how these childhood events could affect us mentally
Mhm.
once we become adults. And then, but the thing that caught my attention in that study was that it would affect our children mentally and would possibly cause mental illness. Things that the parents have
Sure.
experienced. And we all know we can go through a wide variety of things in our lives. And we come across deaths in the family. We come across, unfortunately, some people have experienced being raped. We'll just throw out some different things like that. Robbed, burglarized. You even had a traumatic event that I'm thinking of right now in your life, when you were almost left for dead.
Mhm.
So things like that. We could things can happen so fast, and we can experience things. But then, like, as I stated, this study, I'm going to try and bring it up so that we'll, be on the same page with it. But this study was so interesting to me because the first thing I thought about it was, oh my goodness, maybe that's why people act the way they do.
Yes, I believe it.
And so tell me, let's first start off while I'm pulling this article up. What did you think about, first and foremost, this particular study?
Mhm.
And what were your thoughts when I was asking you to come on? What are your thoughts about this?
Well, as I read the article, the first thing that came to my mind is neurobiology. It's pretty much what that is. It just made a whole lot of sense. I read one paragraph and said, "This is neurobiology." I think that ACEs, I think they call it,
Yes.
adverse childhood experiences, is something that all of us have gone through. There's a point system. They ask particular questions, and if you answer yes to the question, then it's one, and then the next question it's two, three, and then the point system actually will determine your mental state, your physical state, your social state, your moral state in life, and we just don't know that it's happening. I think it is the most unaddressed study there is in medicine.
Why do you say that?
Well, because nobody's really talking about it, and doctors are not really trained on holisticness. They go to a medical school to study medicine. All right, they don't really go to medical school to study uh, holistic or even maybe preventive measures. They may take a class here or there, but the whole point is to make money. Okay, in medicine. And so it is not it's obvious that they in cahoots, I believe, with a lot of them with the pharmaceutical companies, because it's all about money. Now, an average doctor will tell you otherwise. They'll turn to Donald Trump and say, "I didn't do that. I didn't say that. I meant wouldn't, not would." Okay, so the dog ate my lunch, so they won't admit it. But I think at medical industry at large, and of course, everybody go to school to graduate to get a job to make money. Surely. But I do not believe that they, for instance, if I've heard a doctor of medicine say that if there's a water cooler there and 100 kids drink out of this water fountain, but 98 kids come back and they're tested positive for poison, the doctors will give these children antibiotics, antibiotic after antibiotic after antibiotic, and most of the doctors, if any of them, will eventually say, let's shut this fountain off. It's something in the fountain. But no, let's give them antibiotics so that they're not trained really so much. And it's not so much that they don't care. It's just that, how can I continue to practice if I teach everybody about preventive measures, and then who's gonna come in here sick? I mean, I think it's, and that might be that might be a little bit much to the example of what I'm using, but I believe that's the industry. So ACE seems to be a newly discovered thing, although it's been around for a while, because the psychologists have been studying childhood abuse and trauma.
Yeah, I would agree. It's probably just gave it a name.
Sure.
Now.
Yeah.
With so many things that they do.
Mm-hmm.
As I was reading this article, I think, if I'm not mistaken, this was probably prompted by the
children being separated
in that, and then also the children in
sure.
the cave. But yeah, I think it was more so the children that were separated.
Absolutely.
And so they're trying to figure out whether or not this is going to affect them
Mm-hmm.
later.
It could.
It definitely could.
Uh-huh.
It definitely could. And I was looking, and I am going to mention this later, or probably read something from it later. There was another article when it talked about the children being trapped in the cave. There was this psychologist. She wrote an article and says the boys they won't be traumatized, is what she said.
That's what she said. Okay.
That's her prediction. So
okay.
we'll get to that one now.
We're hoping that's the case.
Right. You do hope, because it's not like you wishing, something would, come out of it where they will be scarred
Mm-hmm.
or not able to be able to adjust, in life once they become older. But yeah, that's what we're dealing with. Go ahead.
Well, I believe everything deals with memory. And the memory of this tragic thing that happened to them, but also the positive thing that comes out of this is how people came to their rescue. Number one, seeing that the support from their parents while they were in the cave. What could help them also is the coach that was always there, who didn't abandon them. All right, getting to the hospital and how the hospital treated them. All right, all these things could have the positive adverse effect on their lives, and they can look at this tunnel experience as, wow, we went through that, and look how we came out of that. Well, unfortunately, the ACE study was mostly studied on 70% of white people and college people, okay, students, not blacks. All right, so you have to understand, there's a whole lot of African Americans that were left out of this study. We go through some of the most tragic experiences in our neighborhoods, especially in the rural areas, the big city areas and if you don't examine it, a police come to that particular neighborhood and arrest a kid for shooting someone or some type of attack or carjack or what have you, and they throw them in jail, or they throw them in what do you call that when they're young? Juvenile. Okay. And the jail don't rehabilitate them. It just holds this thing. That's all it is. It just holds it until it's time to release. And when they go back out, the chances of recidivism is high, because when they go into jail, then they meet other children or adults that are like them. Okay. And then they go back out, and then before you know it, they're only out there a couple of weeks. Some of them are. All right. So isn't this being studied in the African American community as much? All right. And so this probably can help. Even I think all police should be able to study this. I don't know what they study. I'm sure there's some type of psychological classes that they go through, but look at some of the nonsense or senseless killings and shootings that has happened among police to its civilians. Senseless. The case is going on now in Chicago, where the mentally ill boy was behind the door and the police shot through the door and killed him and the mother or the auntie or something like that because the police didn't know how to de-escalate a situation to a child who might be showing mental illness.
Right.
So what do you do?
Which is, oh God, that in itself, that's a whole nother show right there,
Sure.
because that bothers me, because then you're looking at, well, what kind of training did you get,
Mhm.
and what are you putting into practice,
Absolutely.
because you're going to come across all kind of people. You can't just say, I'm just going to shoot, that's going to be my resolve. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting off into something else, but yeah, you brought up a whole lot.
The person who shot and possibly survived, there's a trauma there.
Yes.
And how he or she looks at the police department at large. Okay. And then the memory, there's three types of memory and there's three types of stress. And I'm sure we'll get to that in a minute. But all of the memories of, we were on your show a few years ago and we were talking to, what is your professor at your college?
Dr. Marilyn Colosimo.
Yes, her. I don't know if you remember that show. It was an amazing show, and she talked about some very important things.
Yes, that was. I think that was the first show, wasn't it?
Was it? I think it was the first show.
My very first show.
Jemim was on that as well, and we brought up the different types of memories, declarative or explicit memory. But everything starts with sensory memory. The sensory memory, then declarative, then somatic, and then they got what's called declarative. And then a whole lot of stuff. Yes, light bulb memory, procedure memory, long-term, short-term, all that memory is going on.
That's why I like talking here. We can be really geeks and nerds, talking geeks. About this.
All that stuff is going on like this, this, like this, like this. But when it comes to stress, there's only three that we can think of. And as we go into the reading, I'm sure we can bring that up.
Okay. All right. Great.
Yeah.
I see Demetrius popping up another article here. Oh, wow. Okay. This is a lot.
TraumaDissociation.com.
Okay. I think that might have been one of the other ones, because I was telling you I pulled up some more articles to kind of support this. But let's go to the one that I did put into the live feed. Many of you see it already, talking about trauma suffered in childhood, echoes across generations. Now, but I have to stop and go back to what you said a moment ago. There was a light bulb that just went off.
That's a memory. Light bulb.
Yeah, there you are. When you mentioned about where the study was done. Mm-hmm. And for obvious, maybe not for obvious reasons, why do you think that they did not go into the Black neighborhood to do the study? Is it simply they don't want to? It's a racial thing, or maybe they just don't want to find out what they probably already know? What are your thoughts?
Do you think there's racism in the medical industry, in the medical community? You think there's racism there?
Yes.
What about the psychological community?
That's interesting. I think it's everywhere.
In the educational community?
Yes.
There's racism, right?
Yes.
So those who do the studies, there's racism among the CDC. There's racism in politics. There's just racism. And I believe that ignorance have always been lucrative. So the studies are done on African Americans as it pertains to studying them as lab rats. But when it's done on, unfortunately, Caucasians, it's a different type of study. There's more care and delicateness done with them. But we're shot with diseases or what have you and say, now grow and let's study you. Okay.
Right.
And that's why so many African Americans, especially your fathers and mothers and grandmothers and grandfathers, hated going to the doctors because they always heard about the syphilis study and all of these things, AIDS studies and other things where they use as a lab rat. So they did not want to go to the doctor because they thought that they were going to be treated as such. So I do believe a lot of racism has a part to do with that, and how we're looked to as, in many cases, unhuman. We're still looked to as being unhuman to some of the most educated men and women out there. We look to be unhuman.
I would agree. Yeah. I would totally agree. Well, that's interesting. If any of you have any thoughts on why you think this study was probably just done in one area and not necessarily addressing, because you would think the study should be done in the area where there are probably, or there will be, more adverse childhood events. Where it's an increase there, or a great number, should I say. Why wouldn't you do it there? You know what I mean?
Why wouldn't you do that? Exactly. And I think this study, as we're talking about the world, but the church need to study this because we, gosh, have so much mental illness in our churches, and it starts with the babies, and they grow up to be people who take on fivefold ministries. They start church, they pastor churches, they become apostles, but yet they're still dealing with ACE and mental illness, and then they trying to figure out why is it that I'm having all these physical problems, but they don't go back and see where it starts. All right, and there's a lot. A doctor was saying that she had a whole bunch of kids, and the parents and the educational system says all these kids got PTSD, I think they call it.
Yes.
Or it's the AC that hyperactive thingy.
Oh, ADHD.
Okay. Yeah. And the doctor came back with says, you know what? A lot of these kids do not have that. She's like, I tested it, and these kids don't have that. And they were like, surely they do. They're acting out in class. They can't focus on. She says, no, this is ACE. She said, because of the questions that I asked them, told me that because they said yes to this question, then and ipso facto, that means that the obvious or logical answer to the problem is, or diagnosis and the prognosis is, this person was abused. They didn't just grow, come out of the womb with these kind of effects, mental effects or physical effects like Down syndrome children. Something happened in the home. Why they're acting up in school today. This kid don't have ADHD or whatever it is.
Right.
All right. No, this kid has this, but there's nothing that they could do about it because this was still a new study. And even though they realized, oh wow, this is a real study, taboo sets in. Well, how do we treat this? How do we even prevent this? Do we go into the homes now? Do we become social workers? You see what I'm saying? And this is happening in our churches. Look at the death of your pastor.
Yes.
All right. It was tragic for your people.
Yes.
It was tragic for you.
Yes.
So there's a study about there's 7 stages of grief.
Yes.
And y'all went through that.
Yes.
I was there. I saw it.
Correct.
Can we go through that? Can we go through that right now?
The stages? Oh, you mean what? The stages?
Yeah, because I would tell you, I saw. We don't have to pull them up. I know them, but you can pull it up. Go for it. But I saw those stages in some of your people. I was blown away by it because I think for studying some of this psychology and even talking. Well, I'm glad that Joyce Graham's there. That's my teacher.
Yes, she
Joyce
is.
Graham is my teacher.
Both of ours.
Oh, absolutely. And but before I met her, while I was a musician at your church, I saw your pastor shrink away. I was devastated. So the 7 stages, the first is the initial shock. Okay, y'all were shocked it happened because you wasn't expecting it to happen because there was a service prior to him dying saying that he gonna come through. Do you not remember that?
I do remember that.
Okay, and then denial set in. No, he's not dead. I literally heard that from a couple of members. He's not dead. He gonna rise. Okay, and so denial, anger set in. How could this possibly be? And if they were worldly people, they would have. If they were weak in the faith, they would have turned on God. Maybe some of them did. I don't know. So anger set in, and then they begin to bargain. That's another stage. They begin to bargain by coming up with solutions or the reasons why. Or surely he's going to rise. I literally saw a post where they said, no, he's going to rise again. Now, they weren't talking about rapture. They were talking about in another few days. I said, wow, they're going through these psychotic stages. Okay. And then after that, depression sets in. And now they're trying to cope. It affected their praise. They came to church and it was like they were not there. You understand what I'm saying? and then I think the next stage is
acceptance.
No. Before acceptance, they begin to test. It's called testing.
Oh, you're doing the 7, not
7,
just the 5.
not the 5.
All right.
7. The 7 came on the woman named Elizabeth Ross and I think David Keebler. They wrote a book together, and I think they might have added 2 in there. And I'm glad that they did, because that does happen. They begin the stage before the last is testing, and they begin the person began to the testing can be positive, because what do? Let's find another pastor. Let's try him out. Did y'all not do that?
Indeed.
Absolutely. And then the acceptance. The man is dead. He's not coming back. We have a pastor. Let's move on, but cope with it, because the memory is still there. So the churches go through these things. The church at large need to study this ACE. It's important.
It's definitely important. I've said from the time that he closed his eyes to this day that I believe that we should have gone through counseling.
There it is.
The entire church.
Absolutely.
And this is no mystery. This is not something I'm just now saying.
Yes.
I have said this over and over again. I believe that we would have benefited from it.
Yes.
And I believe that a lot of choices and decisions that we made, within the past, what has it been, 5 years, a lot of them would not have been made.
Absolutely.
That's just me. That's Annette talking,
But they're shooting in the white schools. What do the people do in that town? Immediately, they give them counselors.
Exactly.
Grief counselors for the students and for the staff, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Shootings come to the Roseland or Inglewood or Gresham or Auburn Gresham, place like that. Ain't no counselors given in the black neighborhoods to the parents, nor to the students or the children who saw this shooting, this drive-by. No counselors. Why is that? That goes back to our original point about is there bigotry and racism among that community?
Oh, this is deep. Okay, I'm looking here on Facebook Live. Want to try and acknowledge a few people. Brandy, she wrote out the 7 stages as you were talking. Okay, this is
yes,
fine.
this
Thank
is
you.
good. And she added a couple others, and I think depending on who did the study.
Correct.
She brings up
she has shock and denial, pain and guilt.
Yeah.
And then anger and bargaining, depression, reflection, loneliness.
I think she's breaking them down.
Yes.
Yeah.
The upward turn, reconstruction, and working
yes,
through.
Yes.
And then acceptance.
Brandon McCord, another one of my heart.
Hey, indeed.
Yes.
She truly is.
Yes.
Thank you for posting that. That's actually one of the ones I just, when I was pulling it up as he was talking. Dr. Graham says here, absolutely, there is a direct correlation between the number of adverse childhood experiences a child had and the number of physical, emotional, and mental issues that same child had. In other words, adverse childhood experiences or trauma can impact every aspect of a child's life.
Yes.
I would totally agree. Did you want to make a comment on that?
But she's right, because it's all about the stress response system that the body goes through. It's the fight or flight. Is what it is. And these kids go through that. One of the doctors made a great analogy, because I've been studying these guys for so long, so I'm sorry for the nerdiness. Okay. But one doctor talked about how she used an analogy of the bear. You in the woods and the bear, you see a bear, and then what happens is your body system is doing what it's designed to do. It sees something. Now it needs to decide whether to fight it or flee from this bear. So this hypothalama, I think it's called. This affects the pituitary, which affects the adrenaline, and which affects the cortisol. All right, and all these things are operating, and your eyes dilate, and you begin to sweat and all this stuff, because you're getting ready to either fight this bear or run from this bear. Well, you're gonna do one of the two. You escaped. But she says, that's if you're in the woods and there's a bear. What if you're at home and the bear shows up every day? And the bear is your father or your mother or the uncle who comes over and molests you every other day. What do your body do? And you're a child. So the stress level goes through this trauma. And then what happens is it's just like a person who's watching. Remember the show The Exorcist that came out in the 1970s, 1974? It was so shocking to America that you can only see it once.
I never saw it. I didn't want to.
Even today, it's so shocking. Okay, you can only see it once. Now, today, The Exorcist is cute. Why? We have been desensitized.
Okay.
All right. So when we watch certain TV shows, even on prime time, the killings and the murders on some of these CSIs. And back in the day, they used to try to shield us from that type of stuff. Now a kid could watch that and be so desensitized and go outside, see a man shot dead in the streets and be like, let's go get some ice cream, because the bear keeps showing up every day, and the effect of what's supposed to be normal now is being interpreted differently. So these nerves, or this neural whole aspect, is now, you touch me, I'm supposed to feel good. Now you touch me, I'm repelling against it. That was supposed to feel good, don't feel good. So what's good is now bad. What's bad is now good. And so my coming up, I had a friend, his name was Tony. Tony treated animals different than me and my brothers did. When we saw an animal, we fed him, we pet him. We So there was a whole bunch of cats on the porch. And I literally saw Tony, we little boys, I literally saw Tony take one cat at a time and throw the cat down the stairs brutally. Just take a cat, squeeze the cat in his hand, and throw it down the stairs. And we're looking at this in shock. I'm like, why is he doing? Why is he torturing these cats? As I got older and rehearsed that memory in my mind, I realized something happened to Tony. This is ACE. He saw something. He'd gone through something. Now, could it be hypertension or whatever, this thing that I keep saying I don't
ADHD?
Thank you. It could have been that, or it could not have been that. You see what I'm saying? And the it's treatable. Both of them are treatable, but it's also taboo.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting how you mentioned about the animal. I was just thinking in my mind how when I was young, maybe like 10 or something like that, I was attacked by a dog. I think I probably mentioned this to you before. I don't know. And I'm actually, my next door neighbor was my really good friend. So I was going over to her house. We walked down a little, through her gate to see if she was home, and didn't realize that the German Shepherd was loose. So he came at me and basically kind of like tore my clothes, and I'm like screaming and everything. And to this day, I do not like dogs.
Oh, see? Absolutely.
There was a friend of mine maybe some years ago, 6 years ago, had a dog at their house, and they were like, well, this dog's going to be at my house. So, if you're going to come by, just know this dog is. I'm like, but I don't like dogs. But I ended up, I don't know what I did in my mind. I adjusted to my friend's dog, and I wasn't afraid of that dog. Now, any other dog come, outside of that, I don't know. I don't know how I would react, but it was up until that point, I was like, I don't like dogs. And I had to think back, where did that come from? Now, when I really go back in my mind and think about that incident, I think that dog was just trying to play with me.
Probably.
I took it as that dog was coming to attack me and, kind of like rip my clothes because I'm trying to get away and everything. But yeah, that kind of reminded me of that. But I mean, I didn't go and throw dogs down the stairs or anything like that after that. I just stayed away from it. That was my reaction to it.
It was not in your nature to do that. And that was an episodic point of view there. The three types of stress. And we all went through that. I call it PTT. Okay. The positive stress, which is good, because good stress is still stress. But in a child's life, positive stress is I'm getting ready to go play ball and my team is up by 4. Okay. We were almost there. That's stressful for a child. We got to win. Stress could be anything as it pertains to competition. All right. Positive. But then there's tolerable stress. That's the second one. That is the stress that me and my family went through. And what is that? That means there's crime in the neighborhood. We saw shootings. We saw men murdered in front of our porch. We saw all of that. But we had a family that was the opposite of that. My father was always home and mother was home. We had cousins, what have you. We had a church family. and then the school was very supportive. So it's negative stress in the neighborhood. We got to go through gang ridden streets where the vice lords on one end and disciples on one end, but when we went home there was safety. So that's called tolerable stress. That was my family went through. Thank God for the family in the church, or we would be crazy. But then there's toxic stress, and that's what we see in a lot of children. The toxic stress of, they weren't in the Jones family. They were our friends who stayed outside after the street lights came on. And we're looking outside the window, wishing we were out there. But we couldn't see in the future, 25 years later, that these same kids were going to be in jail or strung out on drugs or possibly dead. All right. So they were going through toxic stress of having to always watch their back. They were the ones that were in the gangs. They were the ones that were, carjacking, things like that. That's toxic stress. And so they are high up on the ACE pointing system. And many of those kids are now having physical problems. And as you know, heart disease is number one. These heart attacks and strokes and COD and these things, the doctor's trying to figure out, this is not in your family, so why is this happening? Mom and dad probably didn't have the physical problem, but they might have had some social issues. They might have been mentally ill too. And the study says if they're mentally ill, it affects the child in ACE.
Yeah, definitely. And I, like I said earlier, that's what really caught my attention about the children. I guess probably because my heart really goes out to them, and then sometimes they don't know how to react. They don't know how to, fend for themselves or whatever.
Mhm.
And then what has happened before they were born, sometimes affects them now.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm looking here on Facebook Live. Dr. Graham says, Dr. Nadine B. Harris, she likens childhood trauma, the child experiences as a bear coming home every night. That's where you were. She was given the name.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Demetra says here, unfortunately, we as a people have been conditioned to just deal with our tragedy. Did we get counseling after slavery? Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, wow.
Of course not, she said.
Who said that?
Demetra.
I figured that. That's something she would say.
She also says here, because they're not concerned with our mental or physical health, especially since they want to keep us bound and dependent.
It's lucrative.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Tori Hall, thanks for joining. Angela Elaine, Rodney Jones is on. Demetra's Hunt. And I saw Derek Bridge on. Deborah Brown. Hi, Auntie Deborah. Good to have you on. And Josh Matoya, thank you for watching. And Andrew Rose, Fate is on. Thank you for watching.
Hey, Fate.
And Jamone, my cousin. Darian, thanks for watching as well. Dominic, thanks for joining, my brother. Chris Bass says, two of my favorite people.
Chris
Ned and
Bass.
Walter, have
Bass
a great
head.
show. Janice, thank you for watching and supporting us today. James, Tennille Jackson, thank you for watching. And Danielle Carpenter, I think I said everybody's name. So if I did not, please forgive me. I just didn't see it. I want to, let's see, where do I want to move next? And I don't want to, we've addressed, the situation of, maybe what an ACE is, and talking about, and I'm so glad you brought up about where the study was done. We mentioned that. We talked about that and possibly why they didn't do it there. But while we have addressed that this is something that could possibly happen, how do we deal with it? How do we deal with these ACEs or setbacks or challenges? Because you said something earlier, you're going to face something in life. You're going to face different things, and not, you don't sit down and map out your life. Okay, I want this to happen when I'm 20, when I'm 30, or whatever. Things happen, but how do we get beyond? How do we try to deal with it or cope? Or how can we encourage somebody who has dealt with, situations as such? Maybe they're still kind of stuck there. I'll say this and see if you could answer that for me, Sir Walter. But when my brother was murdered, my only brother was murdered, that was traumatic for me.
I'm sure.
I was 15 maybe years old. It was the summer, me going into my sophomore year, I think. And that in itself, I could not understand. I came away from that not understanding. This was back in 83. I couldn't understand how someone could come and take someone else's life. Not that it hadn't happened before my brother, but it was personal then.
Mm-hmm.
It was something that got to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I could not understand how this could be. There were a wide variety of things that happened after that. When, when I went back to school, went to my homeroom class, realized that his sister, the sister of the person that pulled the trigger, was in my class.
Mm-hmm.
That was traumatic for me.
Mm-hmm.
I was scared beyond anything. And then when we got to the trial, they caught the guys. We had a trial. The individuals, because it was two guys, their families were threatening our family. We had to have police officers to escort us in and out of the courthouse. Had to have police officers at our home to make sure that we were okay.
Yeah, trauma after trauma.
How could you, threaten us? You took my brother's life away. Your loved one took my brother's life away. Yet you're going to threaten me, and it was something to go through. I slept with the lights on for probably a year or two after that, with the TV on. Yeah. I was just afraid. If you were not blood related to me, I did not trust you.
Wow.
So that in itself, is something. But then, I had to, of course, get older. Once I got older, I had to realize how to deal with all this stuff. But what would your suggestion be, or how would you like to address that?
Sure. I think it's such an easy study. It's just so easy to buy a book from Amazon. It's so easy to go to Google and just study who your family is, study who you are. Married couples need to study it too, because it probably will help them understand their spouses. I've did the show called The Birth Order by Kevin Leman. Dr. Kevin Leman is a brilliant man who studied the adverse effect of people who are in families that were either an only child, the oldest child, the middle child, the baby child. And although one size don't fit all, he did say that it depends on your relationship with your parents, and then your relationships with your siblings, and then of course your relationships with the world. The scriptures talked about the fruit of the spirit. There's 9 of them: love, joy, peace, and it goes into the others, long suffering and goodness and faith and what have you. Against such there is no law, but there's sets of 3, and each 3 sets determine your relationship with something or someone. The first set is your relationship with God. How was your relationship with him? That would help you solve a whole lot of problems. Your second relationship, your second 3 set is a relationship with people that you come in contact with, family, friends, and whomever. And then the last set is how you're dealing and coping with yourself. All right, so everything has a system. God has created a wonderful system. This ACE thing, I think it overactivates the immune system. It overactivates it. And if you ever seen an immune system go crazy, it's liable to do anything to you. But then what it also do, it deactivates the central, that's what they call that, the vortex, that cerebral vortex, I think they call it, something like that, yes, where normal activity happens and causes you to reason. Well, ACE causes you not to reason normally. So a kid acts out because of the adverse effect of what trauma it went through. So what do? I still believe in preventive measures. I believe in social work. I believe that the church should try and equip itself with psychologists and counselors and doctors and what have you. A lot of the white churches are doing it. We don't do it because it's taboo. We just throw oil on each other and talk about prosperity, and we're done with it. I dated women who had a lot of these effects here. I didn't know until I got old and began to study psychology to realize I dated that girl. Okay. I remember one time we were in an argument, and and a woman that I was engaged to, she turned to me and says, "Why don't you hit me?" And I said, you joking. And I looked in her eyes and I realized she was serious. Why don't you ever hit me? And then I got it. I realized she probably was used to that kind of abuse. She might have saw her mom being abused by the boyfriend or the husband, the father, or she might have experienced this type of abuse, and that became normal for her. And to some women who go through this type of abuse in relationships, to hit her is an interpretation of love. That's how she translated. He don't love me if he don't beat me. And then in sexual intercourse with a lot of women I've discovered, from men who talk to me, women who talk to me, they have to be abusive in sex, or it was not good sex. The asphyxiation and choking and the toys that they use that causes near death experiences.
Jesus.
Yeah, sadomasochism and things like that. That's, I believe, part of that is part of the ACE. All right. So I think that we need to educate ourselves, first of all, on it, and then talk to the families, have family counseling. We like to do counseling after tragedy happens, but we don't like to have family counseling when nothing's wrong. And
Preventive maintenance.
yes, because I started when I was married. My pastor, I thank God, that's one of the smartest things he had said. It was a former pastor. He said, "Why do y'all always come to me when there's always a problem? Why can't we just sit down and have a conversation just about relationships and marriage without you now? He getting ready to leave or she getting ready to leave." I thought it was brilliant, and I still think it's brilliant today. My goddaughter, my Leah, was proposed to. A couple of days, was it yesterday? I think she proposed to by a young man, saved, sanctified, an elder of the church. I don't care.
Counseling.
I'm still going to counsel her. Her pastor's going to counsel her as well. But as my daughter, we're going walking, and we're going to talk about everything. Everything. Because I talked to my daughter Rebecca, about everything. Preventive. Because then I could possibly be saving a situation that could possibly come up.
And that's good. That's key. You're not afraid to deal with that. And I think that there is a sort of fear, especially in the African American community, Black, whatever, however you want to label it. There is a fear there. A lot of times, I always say avoidance. We like to avoid things a whole lot because 9 times out of 10, you know what's happening. You know what's going on. But then once you put voice to it or acknowledge that then there's a responsibility on you. You have to do something about that.
Absolutely. There is a responsibility on me, and then the torture of me not taking the opportunity to talk to her and then seeing this stuff happen. And now I got to deal with myself. I could have prevented this, and I think a lot of parents are to blame for the child having this type of adverse these experiences. The parents are to blame, but we don't beat them up for it. Let's see if we can get help. Still for the parents as well. That because we're focusing on the children don't mean that the parents don't need help, because some of them are still rearing children. They're having babies. There are some mothers out there that don't need to have no children. Oh my God. They don't need to be having no babies at all. Put a lock and chain on her lower proclivities, because
that's a commercial break right there.
Oh my God. Because I was at a store. It was a liquor store. I had a sweet tooth at the time, so that was the only store open at night. All right. So I went in there for some cookies. Okay. So I went in there, and it was in the hood. All right. The projects was up the street. And I walked in there, and it was wintertime. I never forget it. This little kid was jumping up and down the heater system at the store. The mother was buying whatever she was buying, and she was with her friend. And the mama finally turned to the kid and says, "Get off that heater." This kid might have been 6 years old. The kid turned to the mama and said, "F you." All right. Now I come up on the Lawrence Jones Jr.'s house. You understand what I'm saying?
Okay.
My daddy was militant. All right. We ain't even look at him funny without having to not that whole rod situation. I got the marks to prove it. I've got ACE as well. Okay. Okay. I wanted to beat the living daylights out of that kid, Of course, I couldn't do that, or the gang was gonna come after me. So I'm looking now. That was tragic enough for me to see that. What was more tragic, though, was what the mother's response was. Her response was,
She laughed at it.
she laughed at it and turned to her friend and says, you heard what little Pookie said? Say it again. F you. And I says, oh my God, here we are. That little boy is getting ready to get old enough to break in my house and carjack me. That boy right there. All right. Now I walked out of that store almost in faint mode because I wanted to beat him so bad. You ever been so angry that you want to faint? I had a tragic moment there. That was a car crash for me.
Oh my God.
But these are the kids who are killing each other in our streets right now. The parents.
Unbelievable.
Latchkey. It's cute. The Pistol Starter. That's probably his name was. The Pistol Starter. I bet you that's what his name was. Tragic.
Oh my, that is tragic. Well, I mean, we have to, I agree with the preventive maintenance, the counseling, all of that definitely needs to happen. And, not be afraid. Don't be afraid to address situations. And you said something earlier, in our churches, a lot of times we just slap the oil on and we just try to keep it moving. But there has to be
slap the pastors. No, not literally. I don't slap the pastors. I meant with knowledge. Okay. They are part responsible for this mess because they will not talk about it.
Well, a lot of that is because of ignorance.
Ah.
But there should be enough knowledge to know, okay, I can't handle this. Let me bring somebody in that has this expertise, the knowledge, There
it is. You had Pastor Hunt, I think his name is. Is it Hunt?
Apostle Dion Hunt?
Apostle.
Yes.
Probably my favorite.
Is that right?
Practical man.
He very, very much so.
And I've heard his teachings before. I think I was introduced to him by Brandy.
Yes, that's her apostle.
You need men like that who can talk about the spiritual as well as the natural.
Definitely.
Gotta have it. If you escape and close your ears and eyes to the natural, your spirit is going to be affected negative. I believe it. It's going to be affected negative. So I thank God that you have this platform. It's needed because there are pastors who do have something to say about the natural and they need a platform. So these shows like this help them further the platform, to their co-workers in the gospel. Bruh, you need to talk about this, or your members, all they're doing is wandering around in the wilderness and then going home to molestations and rapes and all kind of things, and you ain't talking about it. Now you got a schedule of counseling to do, but you could have just had a session. Say it won't be Bible study today. It's going to be counseling for everybody today, and go out there and bring in somebody and have a session.
Love it.
I'm telling you, it will work. And then have a follow-up after that. Don't just leave them out there. Follow up. It can work. And it can be done for free because there's so many counselors out there who would do it for free. Just let them promote their business and they would do it. Outsource. I believe in it.
I agree. Oh, wow. Thank you for that. My goodness, this time is running. You're not going to go anywhere. Anyway, let's see. Joyce Graham says, right, Walter, a strong support system is extremely important and absolutely essential in dealing with trauma. Tayomi, thanks for joining. Chris Davenport, Annie Frazier. Dr. Graham also says intervention is key. Mm-hmm. It is never too early and it is never too late. Deidre says here, African Americans must do so much better with communication. Some is from our tragic history. Okay. She says she was raised by one from what is labeled the greatest generation, but they didn't talk. They provided. Yeah.
You see what the ad said about the suicide?
I did not. Is this further down?
She says, I have a close relative, an uncle that committed suicide over 20 years ago. No one in our family has ever used the word suicide. They just said he died.
And that's what we talk about. Don't be afraid.
He died. And at one time, it used to be a time when Black people, they didn't commit suicide. They were survivors. But now we're seeing more and more of them doing it.
We are. And I think that, if we take what you just said, the preventive, we, do the counseling, we could avoid a lot of that other stuff because that just did something to me, seeing that. Not even addressing how he died.
Yep,
because you could be preventing someone else in your family from committing suicide.
Yep, absolutely.
I recall not too long ago, a couple of my younger cousins, they came to me and they asked me, can you talk to us about our family history and about this, da 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 da. There were some things that were concerning them that they thought about. And I said, okay. So they were like, no, I want to hear everything.
Yeah.
And I'm like, first I was like, I said, no. They need to hear it. They need to hear it. And I understood why they were coming and asking me that. You can't be afraid to, it may not be the ideal, family history or to share, but they need to know. They need to understand what it is that they, the family that they're in and what could possibly affect them.
The church is secret. Your pastor or somebody, your first lady, anybody gets sick, shh. Just pray. That's it. What am I praying for? I just pray that he healed. Okay, but I can't ask for anything specific. Shh. And then pastor gets sicker and sicker. And now it's leaked that he has terminal cancer. I could have been praying for that. You understand what I'm saying? He dies.
Well, you know what that is. That's our pride in our community. That's that pride we deal with.
That's that old stuff that need to die.
Yes, it does. I
no
totally
pun
agree.
intended.
Yeah, I would agree. Sir Walter, I think what we're going to do here is actually see if we can take a break. I think we do have a poem from Elder Kevin McGee.
Oh, yeah.
And I want it to be played so that everybody can hear it because it's in relation to this. Now, what we're going to do, and let me just go ahead and take a quick break. We'll come back and see how we can coax you into talking with Dr. Gray today.
I got a show to prepare for myself.
You're listening to Mind, Body, and Soul with Annette right here on Intellectual Radio.
Lord, you're holy, and we lift you up and magnify your name. Lord, you're holy. Lord, you're holy, and we lift you up and magnify your name. As I look around and I see all the works that your hands have made, the awesomeness of you, and how your love will never fade. Mere words cannot express what I feel inside. I can't describe your glory divine, but as a token of my love, this is what I'll do. I lift my hands and cry, holy, you're holy, holy Lord, you're holy, and we lift you up and magnify your name. Lord, you're holy, holy Lord, you're holy, and we lift you up and magnify your name. There's not enough words that I can say to tell you how much I appreciate all the wonderful things you've given me, your loving kindness, your tender mercy. My desire to praise you and tell you how much I love you. You see, you're worthy of all of the honor. Lord, you're worthy of all the praise. I don't know how you could love me, how you could give me so much mercy. You didn't have to suffer and die for me. way back on Calvary, but I just wanna thank you. Oh, I wanna thank you. I just wanna thank you, Lord. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You're wonderful, glorious, holy and righteous, victorious, conqueror, triumphant and mighty, healer, deliverer, shield and defense. He's a strong tower and my best friend. Omnipotent, omnipresent, soon coming King. He's the Alpha, Omega, Lord of everything. He's holy, holy, holy is your name. Lord, you are wonderful, you're glorious.
I would be in this place like an alien from space. Mama killed in front of me when I was 6. Images in my mind forever fixed. And so 20 years later, I struggle to understand life, at least mine, that has been riddled with so much strife. Is there hope? Because I don't see none. If there is a devil, maybe he has won. So how do I encourage my kids who look at my life and see nothing but skids? I call out, God, are you there? Or am I simply calling on air? City streets crying out for healing, bleeding and his life force depleting. Calling out to anyone who can hear, is there anyone who would shed a tear? Not the way it's supposed to be, not in the land of the free. Enslaved in our mind, killing off mankind, warped mentality, human mortality, backwards morality, senseless decisions, family ties segregated into division. Money is the talk of the hour. Kill off each other and gain the power. That's the life we live. We take but refuse to give. No shame, dangerous game. Death bell rings. No more songs to sing. Where do we go from here? Nowhere.
Where do we go from here?
Nowhere.
Nowhere.
Ooh-wee.
That's pretty good, Kevin. That's some of your best work, man.
That's deep. That's deep. That was actually a spoken word from Elder Kevin McGee. He has a show here on Saturdays entitled Connections, 12 o'clock noon Central Standard Time. You all can make sure to catch him on his show. He does a great job there connecting individuals. And he normally, as I state, always likes to write or pen a spoken word.
Send me that, Kevin. Can you send me that, please?
He's trying to get your work. Is it
Kevin is
it copywritten?
I don't care. I wrote it. I could put some.
You want?
You got a nice little tune to it, but I'll put my own music to that.
Oh my goodness, Lord have mercy. But thank you again, Elder McGee. We appreciate that. That's right on time and definitely something that we can definitely look at, that it's in connection with today's topic, the first part. Now, you may hear a voice that's on our line right now. I do have the wonderful Dr. Joyce Graham, or as Sir Walter's been calling
Dr.
her lately, Dr. Jag.
As the car. She's expensive, y'all. Yes.
She is on the line, and I'm so excited that she is joining us on today. We are actually, we want to highlight her book. She has written a book entitled Surviving Transitions. And it still relates even to what we've talked about already on today. Because, again, we've already stated that we're going to be faced with so many things in life, whether it's in our childhood, adulthood, and we need to know how to address it. We need to know how to get through it. And the title alone, Surviving Transitions, it's something that will definitely catch your eye and your attention, if you will. Dr. Joyce, how are you on this afternoon?
I am doing well. Thank you for asking.
Ooh,
great.
Nice sound.
Great.
Nice
You know,
sound.
Dr. Joyce, she's been on my heart, and I tell you, the Lord, she's such a sweetheart. Sir Walter, it's another one I met through you. Another one I met through Sir Walter,
I
Dr. Joyce.
apologize. Please forgive me for the intro. No, let me stop.
Pay him no attention.
Please forgive me, y'all.
You know, the Lord really uses this young man. He plays so much sometimes.
And he ain't using me, right?
But he does use him to connect individuals, and I'm for that I'm grateful. But there was a live feed that Sir Walter did one time, and then Dr. Joyce got on there and started talking about psychology. It was some psychology, whatever topic you did. I don't know, Sir Walter,
Right.
but
Yeah, I remember that.
that I immediately hopped in and said, "Can I be your friend on Facebook?"
Oh yeah, I mean, that was a great show, man.
Wasn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah,
That's how we
Yeah.
met.
that's how you and
Dr. Joyce met.
really.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think while your live was still on, I sent her a friend request.
Okay,
I was like, "Oh, she talking psychology. Oh, I like her."
I got to figure out what the name of that show was.
Yes, we have to look back on it. But those of you that are on Facebook Live and then also on YouTube, you may see right now I am putting up the book, a copy of her book, Surviving Transition. I'm telling you, I must say this, Sir Walter, when I read this book, Dr. Joyce, it grabbed me. I really, he's like he's doing a commercial now. He's flipping pages.
I read it in 1 hour.
Did you?
1 hour. Yes.
That might have been the time frame for me as well.
1 hour. It doesn't take you all day to read this book.
It's an easy read.
Very easy. The print is big enough for us blind people. Okay. So
Those of us who are challenged in our eyesight.
and the chapters are very short. They're just a couple pages. So you can get through this literally in 1 hour.
Yes.
And comprehend it all.
Definitely. That's it right there.
Comprehend it all.
Dr. Joyce, can you tell my listeners first before because we can get to talking, where can they find your book?
The book is available on Amazon, www.amazon.com, and also they could purchase it from the Barnes and Noble website as well.
Okay. So Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful. They still have the online with Barnes and Noble because they shut down a lot of bookstores, right?
Oh yeah, they did.
Yes.
Because Amazon.
Amazon is all over the place.
Yeah, they king.
So you have to get this book. If you are have dealt with situations, transitions, events in your life, traumatic events, Dr. Joyce's book is something that I believe definitely will help you. Dr. Joyce says, I was reading this book. After I read the book, I said, oh my God, I got to know Dr. Joyce a whole lot more or better from reading this book. And it just amazed me how you were able to, I love how you put, had the different, of course, chapters and the sections for dealing with certain areas, of your life, and how you, were able to break that down, I guess, into a way that even anybody could understand it. It was simple enough so that we could understand it. But as Sir Walter said, you were able to comprehend and understand what was being said in this book. Why don't you tell us about how you started to pen this book? What were did it take you a long time to pen it? And the history of it.
Okay. You know what, Annette and Sir Walter, that session that he just did, oh my God, that is still in my heart.
Yes, ma'am.
So before we really get into the book, I'm not trying to change your show, but I just felt that this topic that he discussed about trauma, especially in the lives of children, could I just touch just a little bit on that?
Yes, please.
Yes, you may.
That is still just registered in my heart, and we could talk about the book some kind of way, segue into the book.
Yes, ma'am. Go for it.
The end, but I just got to do this, and that. Please forgive me.
Oh no, you are not. You're not out of place, Dr. Joyce. I was actually hoping you would do that.
I was going to leave, but I ain't leaving.
Yes. Okay. Walter mentioned a study in his presentation conducted by Dr. Nadine B. Harris.
Okay.
And Dr. Harris was a pediatrician who opened her practice in a very low income area of San Francisco.
That's right.
So while she was treating the children in that area, she made a discovery that changed the entire scope of her practice. She is the one who discovered that there was the direct correlation between the number of adverse childhood experiences, and Walter talked about that in depth, and the number of physical, emotional, and mental issues that child would experience while they were going through the trauma, and then even later on in life, and he did such an amazing job of describing that analogy about the bear coming home. And when a child goes through a traumatic experience, that they feel that trauma, that as if they were confronted by an actual bear. They experience that trauma. And you can imagine what that does to a child over time when they experience that over and over again. And then while he was talking, I was thinking that sometimes the trauma is from an actual situation, a real situation.
Yes.
Okay, because a child can experience trauma with something directly happening to them physically. But then sometimes it's a perceived threat. And what I mean by that is sometimes just describing what you're going to do to a child is traumatizing. You know how sometimes we as parents tell our children, the mothers especially, just wait till your daddy get home. He's going to get that bill.
Yes.
He's going to take you in that room. He's going to tie you up. That's traumatizing. So even if the father comes home and he's tired, because he's been working all day, even if he doesn't get to that actual, what we call whooping, that child is still traumatized.
Anticipation of it,
Yes, and sometimes the child can't even sleep because they're just imagining what that father is going to do to them. Some parents wake their children up in their sleep. I've heard of this. And give them a whooping.
That was
dead out of sleep. So trauma is something that is really, really on my heart because children are vulnerable and they're innocent. And when they're traumatized, they feel powerless. They feel hopeless. They feel that there's nothing that they could do to alleviate whatever it is that they're going through. And when we talk about the children, those who were rescued from the cave, but even those who were separated from their parents, not knowing if they were ever going to be reunited with their parents, that's traumatic.
Yes.
So, I just think that we have to do a paradigm shift. And instead of asking people, what's wrong with you? What's the matter with you?
Yeah.
We have to stop and pursue and explore what happened to you. Yeah. What did you go through as a child?
Yeah.
What happened? Not what's wrong with you,
right?
But what happened? Yeah. What happened? What did you witness? What happened to you, or what did you witness? Because sometimes even children, when there is nothing happening to them directly, when a child experiences the police coming to their home because maybe their parents are involved in a domestic altercation or dispute, that's traumatizing.
Yes.
That child isn't being physically abused, but they're witnessing that. Or a child who witnesses their mom being beaten or whatever, or even the ambulance coming to a home where someone is ill. All of that is traumatizing for a child. So then and I'm wrapping this up.
Take your time.
Even when a child becomes an adult, and a lot of times, and Sir Walter knows this, and you do too, Annette, and that child grows up, and then that child is sitting in front of you, and now they're an adult. So they're going to have some challenges. Yeah. They're going to get involved in some criminal activity, like Walter said. If there isn't any intervention, if nothing has been addressed, they're going to struggle with substance abuse. They're going to become aggressive. They're going to have some behavioral problems. They're going to have poor self-esteem. They're going to have low self-esteem, anger issues, depression, anxiety, trust issues, you name it. That's why we are faced with the adults that we see in our practice, and Walter counsels also, and then that you talk to people all the time. That's what's behind. A lot of times that childhood trauma is behind a lot of the behavior that we see.
Wow.
And oh my God, I just couldn't go on without at least addressing that issue.
Well, I sure appreciate you doing that. As I said earlier, I was kind of hoping you would.
Yeah.
Because I mean, she has that experience. She's
Mhm.
professional, so
Mhm.
I definitely wanted to get her, her thoughts on that. And it's something you should say that. And as you're talking, of course, my mind was going again. Many of you all talk about Annette. My mind, I'm always thinking, but if you listen to the beginning of my show, what my voiceover artist states, she says, I asked the question, what is really going on in their mind? And
Mhm.
that, I think that's really what propelled me into the area of psychology, because
Mhm.
I've always thought, no, they're not just, it's got to be something deeper. There's got to be something else must have happened.
Absolutely.
I didn't know at that time, like you said, they probably just gave a name to it, ACEs or whatever, but I knew that there had been something deeper there. And so
Right.
that's what,
Right.
got my mind to thinking. So, I mean, you're definitely not out of place addressing it, because I can tell that it's a concern, for you as well.
Thank you
So,
for giving me that space. I appreciate that.
oh,
And
definitely.
now I can answer your question. Actually, this does segue into why I wrote the book. I wrote the book as a result of trauma.
Okay.
What really motivated me to write this book is the death of my daughter. And I'm so glad. Is Walter still in the studio?
I'm here.
He was, I met him right during that time. My daughter
Right.
had
I remember.
my daughter died in November 2016.
Mhm.
That is when I met Sir Walter. I just happened to be just surfing Facebook,
Yeah.
and he was doing a show, and how comical he is,
Yes.
and then how intelligent he is at the same time. I don't know how he mixes that, but he
How does he
does
do
it.
that?
He made me laugh, Annette, even though I was going through still very actively in my grief, but he made me laugh.
Good.
And then I connected with him. And after having connected with him, I connected with so many wonderful people who helped me transition a little bit through, dealing with the death of my daughter. So he was really instrumental at a very critical time in my life. So when my daughter passed away, I had, of course, a lot of questions. Uh, the primary one being, God, why didn't you prepare me?
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't you prepare me for this? So during that time, right after my daughter passed away, I had to sort of recalibrate my faith. That's the best way I can describe it. And while I was in that process, and I was listening to some of the shows that Walter was doing, which helped me a lot, his walks in the park, and just all of the things that he talked about, emotional things, and all those issues. And while I was doing that, I began to reflect on not only my daughter's death, but other things that I had been through. And I described those things in the book. I had a very chronic illness that I faced with some heart issues. I had a very terrible failed first marriage that I talk about in the book that really caused me to have a lot of trust issues with men.
Mm-hmm.
Because I almost did not connect with my husband because I projected all of that anger and bitterness and hurt onto him.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a wonderful man, but I could not let my guards down. I had some walls up that I had erected, and no man could penetrate those walls.
Sure.
Because I had been hurt so much. I experienced domestic violence and physical abuse and verbal abuse. So I described some of those things. I reflected on that. I also reflected on things I had gone through in the church. And let's just be real. I know we're talking a lot about church hurt over Facebook. You see, a lot. My slip fell down, and that's church hurt. This happening. That's oh my God! But there are some real valid, bona fide issues that occur in church because we are people. And, and we all have strengths and weaknesses. And that's no indictment against the church, because that is the place where we really get our strength and encouragement. But sometimes we encounter people who just really don't understand. And that's why I say again that even though the pastor is a wonderful spiritual leader, a lot of times they do not understand human behavior. They've not studied what makes a person behave sometimes the way that they do. They don't even understand sometimes why they behave the way that they do, because they've not dealt into the things of the mind and the psyche, because we're spirit, soul, and body. And so they haven't dealt in those areas. So a lot of times they don't handle things well. So what happened to me as a result of what I call being abused in the church, not physically, but certainly emotionally and mentally, it was interrupt me anytime, Annette. You know how I go on. Interrupt me at any point, and I'm going to share this last point, and then I'm going to see if you have any comments or questions.
Okay, go ahead.
But that the hurt that I experienced at the hand of my pastor, and I do not put his name in the book. I don't believe in that. I know Paul named a lot of people, and so I could have named some people in my book, because Paul named names when he was dealing with certain issues in the church, but I would not do that. So I did not name him, but and I think that he's grown since that time, because that was years ago. But anyway, I went through that where they don't do it too much anymore, but they used to actually silence you. Walter, you remember?
Oh, Lord.
Silence you, sit you down. You couldn't say anything. You couldn't. They did everything short of taking your credentials. Let me just put it like that. Yes. You may still have had your credentials, but you could not operate within the realms of what your credentials stated who you were. So I went through quite a bit. So that's what this book is all about. I survived, and that's why it's entitled Surviving Transition, because transition is inevitable, and we're going to all go through transition. Some of us are in transition right now. And the last point that I wanted to make, one thing that I found out, Annette and Walter, and one of the things that consoled me, and I guess I always knew it, but sometimes when you're going through, especially when you're going through losing a loved one, Annette, like you have said about your brother, it clouds your thought. And I even describe it as sometimes you go a little bit insane, it seems like, when you're going through certain things. But one of the things that I learned, situations are subject to change. People are subject to change. Your situation in life are all up to change. But there's one constant in our life, and that is God. The Bible says that he never changed. There is no shadow of turning or changing with him. He's constant. So when I realized that I could really depend on God, and no matter what I was going through right then, I can depend on him not changing and him staying the same, him loving me just the same. No matter when I was at my weakest, God still loved me just the same. And he never changed toward me, no matter where I was in life. And when I realized that, I think that's what really helped me deal with losing my daughter. Because losing a child, to me, I've lost my mother, my father, my brother. But when I lost my child, that was a hurt that I still can't describe. It's indescribable. I still can't describe it. So I just want, if I don't get a chance, I want to thank Sir Walter for the role that he played in bringing me through that. And Annette, you also for reaching out and letting me talk about some things, because that was therapeutic for me as well.
Wow. Oh, you are so welcome. So welcome. See, I told you, Sir Walter, sometimes the Lord uses you.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. But no, that's a good thing, and it's good to rehearse, how you've come through some things and where things started at. I'm glad you mentioned about how you even, began to write the book, what the result was, why you wrote the book. I'm glad you
Mhm.
did that. And you did mention, because there were, when I first opened up the book in the preface alone, it states, the transition is inevitable and inescapable, which, Sir Walter, we've already addressed earlier in the earlier conversation, is something that we're definitely going to have to deal with and go through. But
Mhm.
another thing I highlighted in that same paragraph is survival is key.
Mhm.
Survival is key. And I'm just so excited because you have brought this out again in this book. And just to let us know that, okay, you may have dealt with this, you may have gone through this, but there's a way you can come out of it. So Walter,
Right.
there was something you were going to say earlier. Do you remember what it was when she went back to talking about
Well, I was going to bring up the aspect of punishment, of beatings. The city, the educational system allowed teachers to beat you,
Mhm.
and that's part of a trauma for many of
Mhm.
us. That that the city itself is responsible for a lot of our trauma because back in our time it took a village, to raise a child, and they really meant it. So if you got beat by the teacher with that stick, black beauty, or there was a black beauty in every class. if,
Right.
if you got beat by that stick and your parents found out that the teacher had to beat you, you got another one when you got home.
Right. Right.
So that was part of it. And I think a lot of parents, especially from the South, because most of our parents, if you live in the northern hemisphere, a lot of our parents are from the South, and I
Mhm.
think a lot of them, they traumatized us on how they disciplined us.
Right.
And they
Right.
didn't realize it because they were being traumatized too by their parents.
Right.
And I think it also had an adverse effect of why we act the way we do today in our Pentecostal worship.
Right. Right. I'm glad you tied those two together because sometimes people who are innocent,
Hmm.
both in the church and in school. I remember the teacher having that long, they call him a rattan.
Yeah.
And I was not a bad child because I was timid. I was too scared to do anything wrong. But most of our teachers would do is say, okay, if you're not going to tell who did it, everybody
Everybody.
line up.
Yep.
I'm going to get everybody, the girls, the boys. And so I was getting beaten for nothing.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything. And that's what happens too a lot of times in the church. A preacher would get up over the pulpit and give it to the whole church.
Yeah.
My thing of it is, if someone has done something, pull that individual off
Hmm.
to the side,
Hmm.
address it with them.
Hmm.
Why, beat up on the whole church? But that's another
Yeah.
show on that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Walter,
Yeah.
maybe one of you can do a show on that.
Oh my goodness, that is
Yeah.
so true.
Yeah.
So true. Yes, definitely we can touch on that over and over and over
Over
again.
and over.
My
Yeah.
goodness. Dr. Joyce, I'll say this, and I appreciate how you, when you talked about your experience with the church, that you did not, of course, share the name of the individual that you had to deal with. But I must say this, and it may sound crazy, but I was upset when I read that chapter. I was like, okay, that didn't make sense. Why they, silenced her and all of this. It just, but I mean, you can only put so much in the book too, but I will say that kind of threw me off because
Yeah.
it seemed as if you were trying to do something constructive and it was not being looked at as such. So I'll
Yeah.
just say that much. I think you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
Sir Walter, let me ask you real quick.
Hmm.
I know you read the book. Tell
Hmm.
me, we kind of did a general overall view of how we liked the book and what the book did for us. Were there any chapters in there that really stood out with you, or was there something very significant about the book that maybe you want to mention?
Yes, every chapter. Every chapter. Because if you look at a movie, you, most people say this is my favorite scene until another scene come and they say this is my favorite scene. I think the book has that effect on me because every chapter I identify with it. I sympathize and empathize because a lot of her story ties into mine, like other than death of someone as close as a daughter or a son. But I did feel extreme pain when my uncle died. The reason why I felt I was traumatized by that because he was also my pastor. So I lost my pastor and my uncle and my favorite uncle. Okay. So seeing him get sick and seeing a man of strength and so much knowledge, he was a walking encyclopedia, which is why I talk the way I do today. See him shrink like that affected me. My father, who has always been a supporter of everybody, but also he provided for my family. All right. He provided for his family. He always took care of my mom and took care of the 9 children. He went out there and hustled all day. One day on the scaffold, because he's a carpenter, he fell and shattered his leg. All right. So my father now is in a wheelchair. At that time he was in a wheelchair and walking with crutches. My father mentally turned into a very angry man. I saw anger every day, and he took it out on us. It got to the point where I thought I hated the man because he was so mean and angry with us. As I got older, I reflected, and it dawned on me. The wheelchair and the injury and the cast on his leg took away to him his manhood, his ability to provide for my mother and his children. So instead of him saying, "Hey, pass me that," before the injury, after the injury, pass me that. You see what I'm saying? Because he couldn't get it. He couldn't provide for my mom. So now he's in a state of hopelessness. And I think if he had stayed in that state, a mental illness would have set in, a depression would set. Because I've seen a former pastor who had a brain aneurysm and spent a lot of time in the hospital and recovery, and he literally slipped into depression. We saw it. So they had to give him medicine for it. For depression. I never thought I would see something like that from a pastor. But as I got older, again, I'm wiser and smarter now, and I'm thinking outside of the spiritual box, and so I'm bringing that up because I'm hoping that more Christians are seeing this show, more pastors are seeing that this stuff is happening, and we got to deal with it. Right. So books like this that we're reading here, a lot of people can say, "Yep, that happened to me. I get it. I understand it." The ending, the chapters at the end, I think are probably, to answer your question, are my favorite because she put everything together in a soup, and the spiritual aspect of it all. I think the ending chapters, the last 2, is more like the Ecclesiastes to me, because the writer of Ecclesiastes, after talking about all of the things that happened, he mentioned the word vain. All is vain. All this stuff happened. He says, but after all this stuff that happened, I still have to think about God. After all the tragedy that happened, the state that I'm in, I'm hoping that this state is, I'm just abased, and I have to just deal with it, that God is still in control.
Absolutely. Amen.
Yeah.
That was a nice little summary, huh?
That sure was.
That's why they call me so.
Okay.
And Annette, one of the things that Walter mentioned when he was talking about his uncle's injury, I believe it was his uncle. One of the things when we're dealing with transition, one of the things that is extremely important, and Annette, even the question that you asked when you were talking about trauma, and you asked Walter, how do you get through it? How do you deal with it? One of the things is that you don't get stuck.
Yeah.
That you don't get stuck, that at some point you learn to move forward. One of the chapters that I wrote about was illness, a very chronic illness that I faced. So I know what his uncle was going through. And with men, the way that they make a living, that's so much a part of them.
Yeah.
And once that is lost, or once that has been affected, it's hard for them to recover.
Mm-hmm.
When I was going through the illness with my heart issue that I had, it really changed my whole life because I could not do some of the things that I was accustomed to doing. I was an evangelist at my church. I was in the middle of grad school. There were some other things that I was involved in. When that illness hit me, it affected every area of my life. But what I had to learn to do, first of all, I went through a deep depression.
Yeah.
I went because, imagine being very active, being in the middle school, just about to graduate and being, very active in the church and not being able to really do those things anymore. So I was very depressed. I was so depressed until I just withdrew from everything and everybody, even my husband, because what he wanted to do, you know how men are, Walter, they want to solve everything.
Yes, Lord.
And this was something he could not solve. He could not make me well. And he was trying so hard. And that was just driving me deeper into depression because I felt his pain. But anyway, I found myself having to go to a counselor. Now, here I am practicing, studying to be a counselor.
I know.
And finding myself on the other side of the desk,
Been there,
so to speak. But I tell you, I went to that counselor and he was the person who could be objective, and I could tell him about what I felt. I could tell him about what my fears were. And then another good thing that I learned is I learned how to make an adjustment.
Yeah.
I continued to teach, but I found out that I didn't have the strength to, how we sing and we read before we even get to our message. I couldn't do all that anymore. Because if I sang a long song and then I read a long scripture, by the time my message came, I didn't have the strength. The illness affected my voice as well. So what did I do? I learned how to adjust. I got other people to sing, other people to read maybe. When it came to school and I knew I couldn't, walk from one class to the other, what I did was they had benches all along the way. I would walk a little bit and sit down, walk a little bit and sit down. And that's how, and when I looked around, I had gotten my degree. I was walking across that stage, but I learned how to adjust to my limitations. I talk about in the book how you have to adapt. And you have to learn how to adjust to whatever new situation that trauma or that transition has caused. You have to move on. And that's what God is trying to get us to do, is to keep moving. No matter, we have to do like Paul. Paul had that thorn in the flesh.
Yes.
And God did not deliver him from, as far as I know, unless there's another book.
That's true.
That they didn't add.
It's true.
But as far as we know, Paul was not delivered.
No.
But that didn't stop Paul from teaching.
That's good.
That didn't stop Paul from setting up churches and doing his missionary work. So we have to keep moving. We have to keep it moving, and we have to adjust, and we have to adapt, and we have to go on.
Wow, this is deep. Let's see here. Sir Walter, you did bring something good about that last chapter, tools of survival.
Yep.
And it's important. Like I always say here, I don't want to just lay stuff out on the table and then get up and leave. You want to try, you want to try and address, some kind of resolve or, to help the people.
Yeah. Why talk about a situation, the problems, and don't solve them? Again, it's jail. It's penitentiary. The penitentiary and jail don't solve the problem.
That's right.
Because unless this person gets life, eventually this person is going to be released. And what they face inside of jail further perpetuates this attribute in that person. So when they can't wait to get out, so they can go back to the scene of the crime, in a sense.
So true.
I remember being home with my brothers. This was the right day that this man tried to do what he did, but my brother Rodney had his van with his tools inside, and this man just out in broad daylight, he and another brother decided to break and ride his van. He chose the wrong day because all my brothers are at home, at my parents' house at the time. So I look out the window and see this man, Brad. I said, Rodney, you got a repairman on, working on your van. He said, what are you talking about? I said, somebody in your van. He says, what? So we all went outside. And then I grabbed the guy and held him against the van until Rodney got to him. And then, of course, they called the cops. And come to find out, the boy had just got out of jail yesterday. You see what I'm saying? You just get out of jail, not 24 hours. The ink is still wet on the release papers. And he's back to, and he's begging Rodney, please don't press charges. Please don't press charges. Well, what help can he get? So some will say, I'll give him a chance. Yeah, give him a chance to do this again and again and again. You're not, so jail didn't help him. It didn't help him whatsoever. So there are, I did the show about the judges, how God chooses judges more so than kings, and how God speaks to the heart of the judge, and how there are judges in the penal system who actually, I believe, are led by God, who don't just put a guy in jail, but he actually insists that this person, while in jail, go through rehabilitation. Absolutely. So they'll bring rehab in the jail, or they will release the person for a few hours to go to rehab. And they realize that system actually do work. Unfortunately, many of the judges are being paid, to put a person in these, especially these private jails, these corporate owned jails. And here's the problem we have.
Deep. That's deep.
It's
Rehabilitation, I tell you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Dr. Graham.
Yes.
I've been calling her that ever since I met her.
I like that Jag.
Okay, Dr. Jag. How about we do that, Dr. Jag?
Come on, keep that. That's good stuff.
Why don't you really quick kind of go over the points, maybe the points of the tools of survival before we end, because again, I want the people to understand that and know that.
Sure, I'll go through those. There are 7 tools, and I'll go through those pretty quickly. They're in the last chapter of the book, chapter 10. The first thing that's really important is to surround yourself with support while you're going through transition, because transition causes us to feel uncomfortable and out of control and overwhelmed. And the tendency is to isolate yourself. That's the first tendency, is to pull away, retreat, and isolate yourself. But during a transition, you're going to need support, not only spiritual support, but because you do need, you need the word, you need to read your Bible, perhaps get counseling from your pastor, you need to pray. But you also need that practical support, is what I like to call it. And so you need to connect with others, and especially if you can, connect with somebody who has been through what you're going through, or who is in that same process and going through a similar experience. Number 2, and it ties in with number 1, you need to socialize and fellowship with others, because again, there's going to be a tendency to isolate yourself. But you need to, first of all, because sometimes there's a trust issue depending on what you're going through. But there are some people who you can really trust and you can really share things with. I was very transparent in my book because I felt like whoever God exposed this book to, that I just felt like I could trust. I felt, otherwise I wouldn't have written that and I wouldn't have been so transparent. But I felt like God wanted this book out, and I knew I could trust the audience with the book. Number 3 is to maintain balance. Very important to maintain balance. You have to take care of yourself. Sometimes when you're in transition, or even when you're just involved in something that's really like a new ministry or a new business, you have to maintain balance, Sir Walter.
Yes.
You can't neglect your nutritional needs, Sir Walter.
Yes, ma'am.
You have to get it. You have to
Teach
get
us.
sleep. You have to eat.
Yes, ma'am. Teach us.
Because what transition does and things that we are doing is it weakens the immune system. So even for those of you who are on medication, you're taking medication, you have to maintain your medical regimen, and you have to make sure you take your medicine, because I really had to do that, especially with going through that when my daughter passed away, and I wasn't taking my medicine, I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping. I lost my hair. All of my hair fell out. It still hasn't grown back.
Wow.
But that was my fault because I didn't maintain that balance, and I didn't really take care of myself. And because I isolated from people, nobody, was really observing all of these changes that I was involved in. So that's very important to try and maintain as much balance as you can. We know things are going to get off, but as much as you can. Number 4, and I'm almost done, is to realize that you're not the only one who has been impacted.
Mm-hmm.
My goodness. I know that when my daughter died, and I keep referring back to that, but her daughter, she had a daughter, Megan. Megan, when my daughter passed away, Megan was 13, in the prime of teenage years.
Right.
And so I was going through grief, but Megan was too. So I had to realize that the death of my daughter not only impacted me, but impacted her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So what we had to do was try to normalize, if I could say it like that, normalize things for her. We had to keep up with the discipline. We had to make sure that, she did the things that she was supposed to do, even though we understood that she was grieving. But we had to realize that she needed to have a normal environment as much as possible. And number 5, this is really, oh my goodness, identify what transitions with you and what does not.
Yeah.
And when we remember the story of Abraham and Lot, and Walter, you can help me with this, but I don't believe that the Lord meant Lot to go with Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
When Abraham was making that transition from Haran to Canaan,
Yep.
he allowed Lot to go with him, but
Right.
Lot became a huge liability.
Yes,
You
Lord.
remember that?
Yes, Lord.
So that's another show in there.
That's a good one right there. I say that all the time, Mother. I say it all the time. He allowed it, but he didn't want it.
Right.
Walter, we better be good, and that is not going to ever have us back together.
I will never be invited to this town again.
And then number 6 is don't allow yourself to get stuck. And we've already talked about that we should be constantly moving forward. And then the last step, the last tool is be aware of where you are in the process. And we all know about, the process of grief, but, or whatever, or transition, or whatever it is that we're going through. We know that a lot of things are not linear, which means that you don't go from point A to point B to point C. You might skip around. You might be experiencing a transition, and then you're trying to, first of all, accept that things are changing, because that's hard too. But you might also be trying to integrate whatever's changed into your current situation. Mm-hmm. So it's not going to be linear. It's not going to go, chronological or like that. But you might just hop around. And what I learned in dealing with things is that a lot of times you might not even go through all the phases. You might skip some. So my thing of it is go at your own pace. Go at your own pace, whatever it is that you're going through, whether it be trauma, grief, transition, whatever it is. Don't let anybody rush you through, or don't try to go at their pace. Go at your own pace. So that was the 7 tools that are included in the book.
That's great. As you were talking about that number 7, be aware of where you are in the process. I think that also, if I can add to that, be honest of where you are in the process.
Absolutely. Yes.
So that can be, essential too in your, in the process of getting over and getting through the transitions. Mm-hmm. So this is great. Again, guys, those of you who maybe have just joined, have been listening and still want to know where to find this book, please go ahead. I actually put a couple of links in the live feed. You can go to Barnes & Noble and also Amazon. The title of the book, again, is Surviving Transition. And the author is Joyce A. Graham. you will see that. There again is a picture of the book. Dr. Joyce Graham, the author of Surviving Transition, or Dr. Jag, as I think she likes to be called now.
Yes.
Because Sir Walter has started something
Come on
in here
now,
today.
come on.
My goodness.
We are trendsetters.
We're trendsetters. Okay. Well, I want to thank both of you so much for your time on today and taking time out to come and be here on Mind, Body, and Soul. We do not take it for granted. My listeners were chiming in and they were appreciative of the topic that we discussed. And, I think it's something that kind of hits close to home for a lot of people, and definitely we needed to know how to handle and how to deal with it. So, Sir Walter, thank you for taking time out. I know you don't normally like to be out too early, on anybody's show. So thank you for taking the drive and coming here and being with us on today and giving us good nuggets, because you did do that on today.
Yes,
so
you did.
I thank you and appreciate you.
Appreciate you too. Thank you for the invite.
All right.
Let's do this again.
I saw Angie pop on there. She's we talked about her earlier. So thanks, Angie. I wanted to acknowledge you. David Franklin, I see you on as well. And again, those of you, again, as I always say, if I didn't call your name, it's just charged to my head and not my heart. I just didn't see it. Lysandra Hutchinson, Nino, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Rob Lee, Andre Carter, Janetta, Catherine Gardner, Adrian McGowan. Thank you. Lysandra. I think I said Lysandra already. Yeah. Beautiful young woman of God. And yes, Adrian was on. So thank you all so much for joining us on today, Dr. Graham. Thank you. I told her I was checking in on her this morning. I know she was recognizing the birth date of her daughter on this past Monday. And I know
Thank you for checking on me. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. I can understand. Never lost a child, just lost a loved one, but I can only imagine, how that is. But it was apropos for you to come on the show today. Yep. It was definitely relatable.
I had fun.
Well, we enjoyed your insight and definitely enjoyed this book. I tell you, like Sir Walter said, it's an easy read. Mm-hmm. Just read it straight through, and it's going to help you. It will trigger your thoughts and make you think and everything and have you propelling forward. So we appreciate how the Lord blessed you to even pen the book. So thank you so much for joining us on today, Dr. Graham, and
you're welcome.
Your input.
And thank you for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. And thanks to each of you on Facebook Live, YouTube, and also on the station's website for listening and or watching us on today. We do appreciate each and every one of you. I want you all to make sure you go to my website, Get Caught in a Net Radio, getcaughtinanetradio.com for further information for past shows you may want to listen to and or view. I do thank you for coming in and joining me every week. Want to thank Earl for producing over there. That's Mr. Master Producer, Earl, the other Winfrey, over here at Intellectual Radio. The other Winfrey, That's good stuff right there. So make sure you all come back next week. We, of course, will have Dr. Shirley Hill. She was recognized and blessed with a humanitarian award on this past weekend. So she will be back on next week with her health segment, her monthly health segment here at Mind, Body, and Soul. So we thank her in advance. And then we have some great things coming up in August and some special announcements that will be made in the coming weeks. So stay tuned to Mind, Body, and Soul. We got some great stuff going on. The Lord is working and doing great things. Go to Get Caught Internet Radio, and I would appreciate you. And until next time, I want you to get caught up with Annette.
You are now tuned in to Mind, Body, and Soul with Annette, where your host, Annette Harris, analyze intriguing life questions and concerns, such as, do Christians suffer from mental illness? Have you wondered why they act abnormal? Or you may ask, what is really going on in their minds? Do you need Annette? Well, keep listening for a biblical understanding of the psychology of the mind.